So then I think what is important about this so-called cult is the existence at a very early stage of guardians of Orwellian memory. First of all, with the Constitution in 1960 of the Orwell archive, with a generous funding from Nuffield College that made possible the constitution of this archival center that still exists today in a perky place in Amsterdam. And also, of course, the Constitution, thanks to Bernard Crick, which is one of the high priests of the cult of Orwell, of the Orwell Memorial Fund in 1981, which allowed and made possible the organization of an annual Orwell conference, which was very important in the rise of the Orwell Prize, which I will discuss later. And also for those guardians, there is obviously the Orwell estate that retains and remains in control of the literary part of this aspect of memory, the literary part of the Orwellian heritage. Then I wish to move on to another aspect, which is more specifically related to the issue of commemoration, which is the presence of Orwell in public space in Britain today. So here again, one first element that struck me was that there was no such thing as, I could not find, any evidence of Orwell statues anywhere in Britain. There was talk of doing a statue, of erecting a statue to him in Wigan, but in 1983, when local authorities decided to redevelop Wigan Pier, but it hasn't yet materialized, to my knowledge. The only instance of an Orwell statue is actually something that was inaugurated back in January this year in Motier Harry, his birthplace, a place which is supposedly, there has been talk about it for the last 7 years, to transform this place into the first ever Orwell museum, but this is not quite materialized yet. Actually, any resemblance, I think, with Orwell is probably purely unintentional. I was struck with how little this looked like Orwell. So, similarly, for toponymy, I was also struck by the fact that very few schools, actually, and I found no evidence of schools in Britain named George Orwell School. There was one such institution that existed in Islington, an area in which Orwell lived, but it was closed down in 1999. And to this day, I think there is no school just bearing his name. I actually asked Richard Blair if he had any information about other countries having that sort of initiative. He will reply to me by the end of the month. So I'll add this to the final version of this paper. So an element that shows this presence of Orwell is something which quite obviously is the celebration of the places where it happens today. And for this there is a host of elements, given how addicted to moving about Orwell happened to be. And there are numerous signs of that sort of commemoration, to start with one of his childhood homes in South Wales. But there is a very grudging, I think, recognition of the presence of Orwell here, as I think is quite notorious. Orwell was not too keen about South Wales, and they have not emphasized the connection between the Orwell family. You see that the plate here is just very tiny on such a massive facade. So there is a host of elements like this in celebrating Orwell in London. I tried to calculate with Gavin yesterday, and we hesitated between 4 and 5 of his houses are bear blue or commemorative plates. So there is a host of that sort of element here. Perhaps more interestingly, the celebration of Orwell's the book lovers corner, the bookshop where I happened to work in Hampstead, with that commemorative plate. So what is interesting about this presence of and those elements of material commemoration is how much this constitutes some symbolical cartography of Orwell, which combines London, the countryside, Scotland, also with the island, with the Jura house in Barnhill, and the seaside town like Southwold. So with a combination mix of you know, the metropolis, the provinces, smaller places like in Wallington, where I happen to live in Hertfordshire. This sort of, you know, this particular type of commemoration seems to affect and bridge very different locations in Britain, which I think is an indication of how there is this relevance for Orwell symbolically about those various types of location, and I'll get back to that for its significance, you know, concerning national identity. So, in terms of commemorations and public festivities, perhaps before I embark on this, I just wish to show you this fairly important aspect of him, which is his grave in Oxfordshire, in Sutton Courtenay, where it's just perhaps not written in a big enough time, but there is a lot of pilgrimage related to the places I've just shown you, and a lot of tourists from Britain, from abroad, just go to London to see those places, and of course go to Sutton Courtenay. And I think that the vicar of this particular parish was probably a bit fed up with you know, tourists not finding the tombstone of George Orwell, and he just put this sign saying that don't look for George Orwell's tombstone, and the name is in fact Eric Blair. So it's an indication that some people got lost in the process of finding this. So that was rather suitably for someone so given to going to pubs and so interested in the culture related to pubs. Quite a few of those, in terms of toponymy, quite a few pubs that there is. Name one newly opened in Islington, and I think that the sign was rather clever, you know, using the penguin sort of color scheme. Also the famous George Orwell pub in Middlesex, with the pigs appearing on the plates. So, and the last element about this is just the fact that Wigan was also quite closely associated with the memory of Orwell when the pier was refurbished, and with this particular pub, which is now closed down in January 2009. So there is, I think, this an indication of the presence in this aspect of toponymy, which shows that there is this multiplicity of forms of celebrations. So I now want to take a look at commemoration as public festivities. So this started off from 1989 with the anniversary of the publication of 1984, and perhaps the peak of this process of anniversaries was obviously in 2003, which corresponded to a host of initiatives. The anniversary of his birth, being celebrated obviously by various Orwell institutions, which I discussed, Privacy International, so all sorts of organizations which claimed them as part of their own, limited to. So those organizations chose this year, obviously, to celebrate him. So